Morning. My name is Sean Suter. I am a city planner and a lawyer. Here in Cincinnati, I own a firm called Suter LLC. We represent a lot of developers, property owners in obtaining zoning and land use approvals. We also litigate real property issues. And I also have a consulting firm called Zone Code, where we write zoning codes for communities around the country. So I've hitched my wagon to zoning, pretty much, you could say. And so I'm happy to talk with you about it. It's where the rubber meets the road in getting things done. And we've got two of the best right here from the city of Cincinnati. I used to work at the city of Cincinnati. I was the chief land use attorney for 4 years. And it was great fun. And we wrote a form-based code. And so anyway, lots to talk about. Love to hear your questions.
In other words, these are the people to know. So if we can, how many of you have had experience navigating zoning or permitting with the city of Cincinnati? Raise your hand. Okay, that's great. So to make sure that we're all on a level playing field, we are going to start today's conversation with a brief overview that Emily and Rodney have so kindly put together. So with that, we're going to quickly go over a few examples and go through this presentation before we get into our Q&A section.
And as we start to talk about the permitting maze and the process and the regulations, I wanted to kind of frame the conversation by recognizing the missions of our two departments, because we don't have these rules and codes just because we like rules and regulations or we like saying no to projects. We have them because we feel that they help us meet our goals for our missions of our departments, which are, safe and sustainable development in the city. It is having economic and cultural vitality in the city. It is having safe, quality housing and a high quality of life for all of our residents. So that's really big picture. I want us to remember the why when we get bogged down on the processes and the codes that we're working through projects. So I'm going to start sort of the tip of the iceberg for zoning, the quick overview of zoning. Big picture, we have zoning regulations in order to provide predictability of development in the city. And that is predictability of land use, so we don't have, screaming kids going over a house or smoke from industrial uses billowing out into residential development. We also have zoning for predictability of just development types so that you don't have large towers blocking air and light and access to smaller scale development. And as we craft our zoning codes and regulations, we are constantly trying to right-size the zoning code to make sure we don't have too much regulation or too little, really to protect the quality of life, but allow creative development and respect the unique character of the city of Cincinnati and allow new innovative development to occur. And so what does zoning do? Zoning looks at land use, which is what you can build on the site. And it also looks at the development regulations, which are the box you can build in. So we're looking at the setbacks, how far are you from property lines, the height, how tall can your building be, the density, how many units can you put on the lot, and other regulations like parking, landscaping, dumpster location, related to how the site gets developed. And how this plays out, the interplay of the box you can build in and the land use is you have this maximum box that you can build in on a site, that is the development standards create that. And in that box, depending on your zoning district, you could put multiple different things. In that same box, you could put a single family house, you could put a 2-family house if it's permitted, you could put a 3-family house, or you could put a 4-family house. So we cross-reference both the development standards and the land use to get to what you can build on a site. And how do you figure out what regulations apply to your property? First and foremost, I want to say you never have to figure this out on your own. Call me early and often, call the zoning division. The zoning info line is staffed by a zoning plans examiner all day during our operating hours. We also have someone in the permit center for walk-in questions. All hours the permit center is open. But there is a map on CAGIS, if you Google CAGIS map, and you turn on Cincinnati and other community zoning, that map will tell you your zoning district. It'll be something like RM 2.0, SF 20, CCP. It will also tell you if there's any overlays, like a hillside overlay, a historic overlay, or an urban design overlay, which will add additional layers of review. And then you cross-reference that with our zoning code, which is in Unicode. So again, you don't have to navigate this on your own. You can call us, we can tell you all this information, but those are the two basic tools that you need to find out what regulations apply to your property. One disclaimer is when you're trying to figure out what land use is permitted, these are tools not to use. Do not believe everything you see in a real estate listing. If they say it's 3-family, it may not be permitted as 3-family. It may have been illegally converted. The Hamilton County Auditor is not necessarily a good source to use for what zoning permits. That is a classification for land valuation. It doesn't mean that you may see multifamily 6 to 12 units in the auditor site. That doesn't mean you can build 12 units on the site. Call us and we will help you figure out what you can do. Similarly, just because someone is doing it at the property in these two photos at the bottom, it doesn't mean that they're permitted to do it. So again, call us when you're thinking about acquiring a site and talk through what land use you want to put on that site. The zoning review process, there's always a spectrum of sort of quicker to longer and more complicated options. So if you can meet the zoning code, the land use, and the development regulations, that is always going to be your quick and easy path forward. That means, if you need a building permit, you're going to turn in that building permit, we're going to review it for zoning compliance, we're going to find you compliant, and that turnaround is 10 to 15 business days, depending on revisions. The same for work that doesn't need a building permit, that's a 10 to 15 business day turnaround. Your quick and easy path forward is always meeting the code. If there's some unique circumstances to your site where there's a justification that you can't comply with the zoning code, we have a zoning relief process through a public hearing. That's, and again, if you call us, we can talk through sort of the feasibility based on your site and what you're requesting to do. That's a little longer process. That's about a 2-month process from application to decision. And if the zoning really just doesn't work for your project and you need to change the zoning district, if that's feasible, or develop what we call planned development, which is a more tailored zoning to your site, that's going to be the longest possible path forward at 3 to 6 months. And so I have the flow chart for that longest process, the zone change process, just for reference, as you're going to want to know what your path forward is early in your process for your planning when you're doing your due diligence. Is this an easy permit, or is this 6 months, potentially more, in the zoning review process? So you can plan for that. And then that's the very, very quick overview of zoning. Again, I said call us for your zoning questions, but we also have a great resource that scopes zoning permissions as well as potentially building permits needed and cost, called Open Cincy. So this is especially helpful for zoning. If you're looking for a site to do a particular use, you can search the whole city for where that use is permitted is one way, or you can search by an address and look things up in more detail there. So I'd recommend you check out that resource. Turn it over to Rodney.
Okay, everyone. The building department is kind of a very unique city agency in that, not that it's any better than the others, but unique from the standpoint that there is a representative from multiple different departments within the department. So, meaning you have the building department, you have representatives from planning, you have representatives from zoning, MSD, stormwater, waterworks, you name it. Years ago, it was kind of deemed as a one-stop shop. The emphasis was, let's get everyone in this building so that we can effectively help others get their permit as fast as possible. And that's really critical, and I'll explain a little more as we go on. But within the department, one of our biggest things is we're trying to make sure we provide as best as possible good customer service. You're going to get your plans reviewed with us. We have development services, and I'll go into that a little more detail in a minute. We have our inspectors there, so those are the individuals who, once the permit is issued, They're the ones that go out to verify that your plans meet what was actually approved. They're the one that signs off on it, the field, so that you can get your certificate of occupancy. And then, of course, we have administrative boards, kind of which Emily kind of pointed out, whether you need zoning relief, whether you need relief from the building code. We have that housed within our department as well. And then, this is kind of a picture of our front counter. So essentially what happens, and I always use this example, if you came into our department for whatever type of permit you need, once you step to that front counter or those orange chairs, which is our counter sections, you're gonna be met with one of our customer service reps. And so they will take your application, your drawings. Behind the scene, after you give it to that customer service rep, it's kind of like spider webs. It goes to multiple different agencies that I just mentioned that are there. They all will review it based on their subject matter expertise. Once they're complete, it's entered into the system, it comes back to customer service reps, they give you a call, they let you know that it's ready to go. So that's kind of how it works behind the scene. I know a lot of people give calls and say, hey, I'm looking for zoning, and I'll say, I'm not zoning, and then they're mad. But that's how it typically functions. We do have what we call tier 1 reviews. These are small projects. For example, hey, I'm getting ready to do a new bathroom, or I'm getting ready to do an addition to my house, to my single-family house, a sunroom, what have you. You can do that generally as a same-day review from the hours 7:30 to 2. And that's, I just use that example, but you can also have small-level commercial projects as well that can be used for that service.
Oh, better. There you go.
Cool. All right. Tier 3. We did have a tier 2. Emily was nice enough to remove that slide for me. We're in the process of revamping some things within our department from a technological standpoint to help provide better services. I'll skip that for a little bit, maybe we can get into it with the Q&A. But in terms of once that permit is in, then behind the scenes, we'll look at it and determine, okay, if it's residential, it gets reviewed in 10 business days. These are our benchmarks that we try to follow. If it's commercial, we'll do it in 15 business days. And there's a lot of different services within an department. At the very top, there's something that's called Open Cincy. So we do have a program for small businesses, or for anyone, developers, contractors, individual property owners, where you can actually use the Open Cincy website, and it was interactive. It will ask you questions about what you're doing. So that map that Emily showed about the land use or the zoning, it will ask you for address. You can put it in by address. You can put in the type of use you're thinking of doing, and based on what you say, then it will ask you additional questions. What the aim of this is to allow individuals who have a vision of something that maybe they haven't put it all together, and they haven't put the whole scope of their business plan together, or what have you. They just have an idea. This gets you a baseline of here are some of the things you're going to need to know as you're developing that. And then at the end, it will, I'm not sure, but I think it used to have like my number. You can call me, and then we can discuss some additional steps of things you can do to help bring it to life. Some of these other ones is basically talking about building permit process, some of the tools you can use, and so forth. We'll go more detail later. Two big programs that we have within the department is courtesy inspection and coordinated site. I've been asked for many years, I couldn't get this changed, so if any of you guys wonder, I'm going to try to make sure I'm proactive in saying what I'm about to say. A lot of people call me and say, it's courtesy, isn't it free? No, it's not, unfortunately. The courtesy inspection program is for any small business owner. If you have a vision, if you have a site location, we did this a number of years because we just had people come into the office, asked us about a piece of property, or sometimes we had an example once actually. Someone bought a piece of property. And they came in and said, I want a permit to do, I forget what it was, but they wanted a permit. We ended up having to tell them, zoning had to tell them, no, that's not permitted. The individual stormed out the office, almost broke the glass doors, and because they were upset, hey, I should have a right to do whatever I want. Well, any city, there's zoning regulations that regulate what you see as they pointed out. And so the buck starts there. We created this because we knew, like, we have to get in front of this to educate clients when they have something that they're thinking about doing, but they don't have all the answers yet. And so we go to the site area, myself and someone from fire specialist, someone from zoning, the air building inspector, for example. Depending on if it's food related, I'll bring someone from health. And we'll go in and walk the inside and outside of that facility. We'll see what we call a homework. I call it the homework list so people can remember. It's really called the checklist. But they'll get that from us, and it basically outlines, here's some of the things you need to know before. And this is what we try to get to, before you buy or before you lease this piece of property. We're there to represent you. Sometimes we'll get owners of the property there, and they'll follow us around, and they'll try to contradict what we're telling the actual client. But the emphasis here is, hey, before you get into this, we'll let you know what's going on. Then you make your decision to purchase it. Now you know if you're okay with zoning to be able to start the rest of the journey. Coordinated site. We've had this for a number, probably good 20 years. It was under a different name many, many years ago, but this is a new car model. And essentially what it is for large-scale new construction projects. So this hotel would be a perfect example of that, where the design team, or someone like Sean, who has a client who's getting ready to develop whatever that is, and we have literally hundreds of thousands of examples of this around the city, where they're going to develop something, we will basically, the team, which is made up of all the reviewing agencies, including directors within each department, will look at the project, go through the drawings, vet it through, and this is way before you do anything with permitting. We'll look at it, so if I'm using Sean, we'll communicate with Sean, we'll meet on it, and we'll go through to make sure that we're putting that project on the right tracks, so that when they do apply for permits, or anything else they may need, so if they need zoning relief from Emily, they know the steps that's gonna happen there. Some cities that I've actually had to deal with or work for in the past, what they will do is individuals will have to go shop each department. The problem with that is that you don't know who you're talking to. And so Waterworks person doesn't know anything about what's happening with Emily and planning and zoning and so on and so forth. This is laid out basically in order of how development happens. Everything starts with planning and zoning, and then it goes from there. And so we try to make sure we help as many clients as possible with this. Last time I knew of, has been very successful, unless someone calls tomorrow and the city manager's office and say otherwise. But so we have both of these to try to basically find a way to help clients of any nature. This is just the application. The fee for the courtesy inspection is $362.25, which I know is an odd number, but that's the tax. So I always try to tell people that because they sometimes want to bring different forms of payment. All you have to do with this is very simple. Come in our office, complete the application, customer service will process it, they'll give it to me. When I have it, I'll give you a call, we set a date. And then this is the application here for the coordinated site review process, and on the right-hand side is some of the list of the departments that are involved, everyone from planning, like I said, to law department. And in between, they're all part of the team. My opinion, some of the very best in the city, because they actually really know what they're doing. And the beauty of the team is we vet all these projects through before you ever get any information from us. And that is it, I think, right there.
We'll keep this up in case you all need this contact information. And another thing, I believe all of the PowerPoint presentations will be made available after the conference, but thank you both. I think that was a really great, at least, introduction. I think one of my biggest takeaways, and Emily said it, these are the people that you want to contact, and it's never too early to get a hold of them. so often, I think we hear horror stories associated with permitting and zoning. And these folks really are here as a resource and as a tool as you're navigating this space. So being able to contact them, connect with their offices as early as possible will really help guide so that there are less hiccups along the road with your project. With that, we're going to go ahead and start our Q&A portion. So we're going to go ahead and start with Emily. What are some of the most common zoning issues developers face when starting a new project, and how can they address them early on?
And I think the biggest issue we see developers faced with is really a result of not contacting us early and developing a project without understanding the zoning. So that's why, if you have one takeaway from me on zoning, it is call us early and often. It is never too early to call us. Because a lot of zoning problems can be avoided by a phone call before you acquire a site. There's probably the right site for almost every project in the city of Cincinnati, but all sites are not going to be the right site for your project. So if you call us, we can go over before you buy the site, and you say, hey, conceptually I want to do 10 units with ground floor commercial on this site. We can give you some basic comfort level of, yes, that seems feasible just based on the lot size and the zoning district, and these are some things you want to consider. Or no, I mean, this is going to be very difficult for staff to ever recommend support on this site because of X, Y, and Z. So I think, really the biggest zoning hurdles come when you develop your project without thinking about zoning. So I would really emphasize calling us early and often, and working with your design professional is going to be a really important part of your project team. And so making sure that they understand the zoning and they understand the regulations, and as you're adding that professional to your team, asking questions like, have you done projects in the city of Cincinnati? Have you ever worked in a historic district? Have you ever worked in a hillside district? Because they are going to help you navigate the project and the process, and their familiarity with those regulations is going to go a long way for a smooth and easy process.
Never too early. You hear that, folks? Never too early. Rodney, what are some key steps developers should take to ensure that they meet all of the permitting requirements? And can you share examples of common delays and how to avoid them?
I would say have the right design team. I use Sean for example. We've been on each other for a long time, so I'm assuming you can. All right. Have someone that, because when we're doing different projects that come into us, we get it from everywhere, from client, for developers around the country and so forth. But I always tell clients, don't hire someone who specializes in residential work to do commercial, to do your drawings in this commercial. Know the plan that you're going to do and vet it out before you even give it to us. Because a lot of times we'll get clients, everyone, time is money. We get that on our end in our world. But at the same time, you can waste a lot of time by not having your information together before we get it. Because we're reacting to what you are giving us. And so if you're missing stuff, for example, because you haven't taken your time, because maybe Sean's getting pressure from his client to get stuff in, then ultimately it's going to result in delays. What's up, Mark?
Give me some examples of common delays.
Oh, yeah. I just have one the other day. I just use this one. So a gentleman called me. He applied for a permit. He did not have all the sets of his drawings. And then we came into the office to apply. So generally you need 4 sets. He came in with 2. Then he's mad because, well, we have to have this because the sets go to certain departments, okay? And so in telling him that, then he's upset with us, but it's customer service told him. So it's just knowing the steps or listening to the steps. I mean, I'm trying to make it simple as possible. Another big one, a lot of times clients will go through the whole permitting process. They'll get to the end, it's approved, it's out the door. Our inspectors get to the site, and then once they're at the site, there should always be a set of drawings on site that have been approved. Some clients will then decide, you know what, oh, I had another idea. And then they start letting their contractor build something different than what was approved. So now they have to come back through because we can't sign off on it. And it's called what's called an engineering change. So that will delay the development of the project as well. That happens more than we would like for it to happen, but that is something that we try to educate clients on.
That's great. Thank you. Sean hasn't talked for quite a while, so we're finally going to make our way over because I think I think you offer a really great perspective outside of Cincinnati, so working with the city. So one thing that I'd love to hear from you is just how your experience has been and how you were able to, at the beginning of your career, get over that learning curve navigating this space.
Well, that's just at bats, doing it over and over and over again. But I will say that every community has a different set of rules. So obviously, and that's kind of unfortunate. There is no uniform code for zoning or any of these permitting process. The permitting process relates to the International Building Code, so that's uniform. But zoning codes are all unique everywhere you go. So you have to know the rules of the game where you're working. That's really important. And so reaching out to whether it's an architect or an attorney or someone who has worked in that place before or who has aptitude at reviewing this stuff and being able to follow these rules and also explain them to you and your team is important. City of Cincinnati is great because it's big and it has great resources and it has money to pay good people and it has great processes and all this stuff has been thought through over and over and over again and refined and continues to be, I think, at the city. Always looking for better ways to do things. And you can see that in the permitting process. It's amazing. The coordinated site review process is fantastic. That doesn't happen in a lot of other places. Many of the larger cities have gotten into that, right? Electronic filings, coordinated site reviews, because they're processing so much stuff and they have the resources to do it. But the smaller places, you might work in a township or a small city, or even in a place with no local zoning, you have to go through the county. And in those instances, they may not have the resources, frankly. So you're going to have to, it's best to hire someone who has worked there before, be part of your team to help you sort of navigate that process. If you don't have that person, you just need to get to know the equivalent of an Emily or Rodney in that place, and just meet with them early and often too, and get to know them and get to know the process, and ask a lot of questions and be nice, and it's just usually there's one person in those places or two people in the smaller communities, so you know who to go to, but it may not be as smooth as the City of Cincinnati's process. So it's important to have someone on the team that can help you through that. I think main takeaway is just everybody's trying to get something done. So be nice, be friendly, be pleasant, be patient, get to know the people that you're working with on the city side. They have a job to do too. And everybody's trying to get to a solution on these issues usually. And so, hopefully, you can make friends and also at the same time follow through with what you say you're going to do. Because you want to have a good reputation with the administrative officials in these cities. You don't, because I've been on the side of the city and you see someone coming in and you're like, oh no, right? Uh-oh, here they come. And so you don't want to be that person. You want to be the person that they say, oh good, I'm going to have a good day today because this developer's coming in and I know that they're trying to do the right thing and are going to be pleasant to work with and cooperative. So that's just some advice I give my clients. Get a good reputation if you can. That'll help you get through these processes much more smoothly.
One kind of follow-up question to that, and shifting focus a little bit, what are some of the kind of major legal challenges you see folks go through in the zoning and permitting phase?
Well, on the zoning side, so the legal issues are all sort of bound up in the Constitution. So there's due process, there's equal protection, there are takings issues around regulatory takings of your property. Those are all bound up in the Constitution. So the city's ability to govern land use is a police power activity, right? So it's protection of the health, the safety, and the welfare of the public. And sometimes those regulations go either too far, and they regulate things that maybe don't need to be regulating. That's what Emily was saying, trying to find that balance of over-regulating and under-regulating. It's all for the common good, the public good. And so sometimes when things get out of whack, as far as regulating things that may not be within that police power, sometimes we have to rein the government back in, and if they're not willing to rein themselves in, then we have to go to court and see if a third party can help do that. So that happens from time to time. Also, unreasonable decisions about zoning sometimes. City makes the zoning map, the legislature makes the zoning map. May not agree with it, right? You may say that's unreasonable, or that's depriving me of all of my economic viability on that property. And that happens from time to time. And if the city isn't willing to fix it or agree with you on that, then sometimes you have to take the city to court and see about a judge making that determination and breaking that stalemate. So it happens from time to time. Real property rights are fundamental in Ohio, and so there's a lot of deference given to the property owner, but there's also deference given to the government because they're in a better position to make land use decisions, frankly. But they're not always the right decision. The other challenges are if you have to get a variance or a conditional use approval or something like that, it's an administrative approval, you may not get the decision you're looking for. You may not get the approval. Or someone next door might get an approval you don't like. There is an appeal process for that. And so there's an appeal process at the city, whether it's going to the Board of Zoning Appeals or whatnot. In different communities it's different, but generally there's an administrative appeal process and then to the common pleas court. And you can take that case to a judge and they'll review the record and decide whether the city made the right decision. But hopefully it doesn't get to that. Like Emily said, understanding what you can and can't do, making reasonable requests. If the setback is 10 feet, or 10-foot minimum and you want 0, it may work, it may not. The board has to balance the interest, the public interest, the private interests, the public burdens, the private burdens, and make a decision. And you may not agree with it. And you may want to do the 0 feet, and they may say, no, you can only do 10. And you can appeal that, right? So that's where we come in. Hopefully, I prefer to come in on the helping you get things done side of things, but we also help you when we have to challenge things from time to time.
Thanks for that. Emily, I know you had spoken about the importance of reaching out to you and your department as early as possible, but do you have any insight or any advice for how developers can engage with the city during the zoning process to make it more collaborative?
And I think half the battle is just knowing that we want to be collaborative. We want to work with you. My team, our goal is always to get every project, to work with an applicant, to get to a project that we can support with a recommendation of approval through the hearing process or whatever, or to get it by right through the permit process. We want to work with you to an approval. We want to, have conversations on how we can get your project to an approval. And we are always going to be straightforward and say, hey, we can't support this, but X, Y, and Z are your steps to get a recommendation of approval. And we want to give you that feedback. We want to review drafts. We want to get you to a yes. Keep in mind, though, that the question is never, does Emily A. House like my project? Or does whoever's reviewing it like my project? There's plenty of projects I may like that don't meet the code, or there's plenty of projects I may not like that do meet the code. The question is, does the project meet the code? So as we're working together, I would say keep in mind, it's never a personal decision. It's always about, does it meet the code? And as much as we're having those discussions and framing conversations and preparing applications, keep in mind the standards of the review. And frame your argument that way. So really just, we want to work with you, and we're never going to take it personally. We'll tell you, do X, Y, and Z, and we can recommend approval. and you have every right to not do X, Y, and Z and take it to a hearing, and that's the way the process works. That's why it's not, all the decision-making power isn't on me. We have a process, but we're going to very clearly communicate with you what we want to see, and you can make the decisions on what you want to do as you move the project forward.
Rodney, I think you shared a lot of really good information and links and information about how to get the process started. Can you share if there are any either recent innovations or technology that the city is looking into in buildings and inspections that can help enhance project efficiency and safety?
Yeah, we're currently in the process of, so right now we use an operating system, that's what it says, it's called Permits Plus. Can you guys hear me this one? Can you hear me?
Can you put it a little closer? Can you guys hear okay? Can everybody hear all right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good. A little louder?
No, I said his voice is loud enough, so I don't.
Oh, okay.
You can hear me? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we have, on your end, you see, if you're applying for permits or anything, it's called Easy Track, where you can then upload your information and get your permits or apply for your stuff. We're in the process now of working with some consultants in the latter stages of it, of having a new operating system that should be easier for not only you, but also for ourselves, to be quite honest. That I'm hoping in the next year, well, we're in the testing phase right now internally, and I'm hoping in the next year, 2025, I would think, it should be rolled out to the public. And so it's going to be able to allow, for example, not to get too much in the weeds, but simple things like how you upload your drawings, for example, should be simpler. When we're having meetings with clients, how we're able to then take those same drawings and then maybe mark them up while we're having like a Teams meeting or whatever. The whole point is to make it easier not only on ourselves, but also on you, so that the permitting process goes smoother. That's always our end game.
We love innovation. That's great. And it might be too early for this follow-up question, but once that kind of update is implemented, is there expected to be like a rollout for the community, so some educational resources for folks as they learn how to navigate that space?
That is in the discussion phase.
That's in discussion.
I don't have the answers on that one yet. Yeah, I've actually asked that question too, so probably help you as well. So it will happen. Don't know when.
Sean, in your experience, what strategies have been the most effective for developers in navigating zoning disputes or objectives from community members or the city?
Well, engagement is key when you're developing. Much of the work that's being done in the city of Cincinnati and many places around now are in urban infill projects. Those are tough projects to do for a lot of reasons, not only technically, but also because you are doing something that's changing the status quo in the neighborhood. And infill means usually taking something that's vacant. And in Cincinnati, it could be a hillside, it could be just a mid-block that somebody sees and says, hey, I want to cut that up and develop it. It could be a tear down, a demolition, a vacant lot, whatever. But the thing that works, and what I tell my clients is, it's like running a political campaign. You have to knock doors. And you should have a PR team in place if it's a big development. I ask, and of course a lawyer, is good to have, but I'm not a PR guy, and I don't knock doors. Nobody would want to pay me to do that. But the point is, you need to have a team around you, especially on bigger, more controversial projects where you're coming in to a community that's established and trying to build something. It tends to be multi-family, and a lot of people have misconceptions of that, and et cetera, so there's an education and engagement component. But knocking doors, my developer clients rarely take my advice on that, and I think it's so powerful. That's what political candidates do. Knock on the doors of the neighbors, go down the street, say, hey, I'm whoever, I'm Bob, I'm here to let you know that I have my eye on this property, and I've got it under contract, and here's what we're looking to do. And I think a lot of developers are afraid to do that. They think they're going to open up some sort of Pandora's box of opposition. But you'd rather have that early before you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on all the planning and all the pre-development work, and then get to a hearing and have the neighbors come out and say, we didn't know anything about this, we don't like this. And look, the people on city council and the people in these volunteer citizen boards like the zoning board of appeals, planning commissioners, they listen to the people that live there. They're not discounted. They're a very powerful voice, and if they say they don't like something, you may have spent $250,000 pre-development and you don't have anything. So get out and engage the neighborhood, the community, go to the community. So what happens a lot of times is that developers they'll feel like, they have to go through the process. They don't want to because it costs them time and money. And so they'll reluctantly go to a neighborhood council meeting. No, start going to neighborhood council meetings once you know you're going to be working in that neighborhood. Get to know the people. PR, another thing. I ask developers all the time, do you have a PR firm? Well, why would I spend money on that? I'm a developer. Because this is a campaign, that's why. Spend a little bit of money on the front end, you'll save yourself a lot of heartache on the back end.
I want to explore that a bit too, because I think for some folks that are starting out in development, they might not have, the extra funds to be able to work with a PR firm. Do you have any piece of advice for folks that are just starting up that may not be able to hire or tap into other team members, but at least keeping some of these things in their mind, or different tools or different contexts that might be helpful for those folks?
Absolutely. Get to know the neighborhood. There's always a leadership group in every single neighborhood. It could be the neighborhood council might be very powerful. Get to know them. It could be one person in some of these places. It could be a pastor at a church. It could be any number of people. But reach out to them. Say, hey, I want to be part of your community and I want to make a relationship with you. It just reduces the temperature. It builds trust. That's hugely important because as developers, you're not trusted. I'm a lawyer, so I come into a room, people don't trust me. I hope they do, but it's just a reputational thing, right? Right? I mean, developers just aren't trusted people. They walk in there like, you're going to try to exploit our community and make a buck, right? That's what everybody's going to think. And they resent you for it. But that's not what yeah, you do want to make money. You're in business, of course. But you want to be part of a community, you want to be a positive part of the community. Get to know the community. That's what I would do. And that doesn't take any money. That takes some shoe leather, some knocking on doors, some making some phone calls, maybe a couple coffees, but that's not a big spend.
Yeah, that's great. So before we get into just a few questions from the audience, so if there's a specific question that you really want to ask these folks, we'll get there and we'll save the last 10 minutes for that. But I do have just a handful of questions, and feel free to, these are for all three of you, but what are the top 3 things developers should do to ensure zoning and permitting process is smooth from start to finish?
Call Emily.
Call Emily.
Yeah, I will be a broken record and say, call me early and often. Again, if that's your one takeaway, it's call me. The second top thing that I would say is, do engagement, as Sean said. Your neighbors, your community council should never be hearing about your project when they get a notice that there's a public hearing in the mail from the city. They're often going to start out with a place of fear and concern if that's the first they hear about your project. If they get the notice and you've already talked to them, they'd be like, okay, don't need to do anything with this. It's Joe's project. Easy. I love that project. And then the third thing, as I said before, is know the codes. If you have to provide landscaping for zoning, make sure that's shown on your plans. Otherwise, we're going to require a revision to your building permit, even if it was just the quick and easy process. It's going to delay it. And know the process. If you've never been to the Historic Conservation Board or the Zoning Hearing Examiner and you're preparing to take your first project there, these hearings are all on YouTube now. You can watch, the couple months before you have to go, sort of understand the landscape, understand what you're walking into, and get to know that process before you take your first project there.
I would just say have a plan. Know what you want to do, even if you don't necessarily. Yeah, just have a plan. A lot of people will call us and just say, I have an idea. That's different than having a plan together. Because that'll cut down on a lot of confusion, a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of back and forth with us. Because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is, you're reaching out to us, our job is to then tell you and arm you with information to help you get whatever you're trying to do, whether existing building or new construction, get it built.
Perfect. This is one of my favorite questions because I really remember things from stories. And so can each of you share an example of a project where zoning or permitting issues were particularly challenging and how those challenges were resolved?
Yeah, just had one this week. You may have read about in the paper, 150 units of affordable housing in Bond Hill. That was our client, yeah. May have pros or cons thoughts about that, but our client, LDG out of Louisville, came in, out-of-town developer, put a contract on this property. It was not zoned. It was part of a planned unit development that was actually, it called for 50 townhomes. It was a 20-year-old plan. And the world has changed in 20 years, and now townhomes are not feasible. So the developer wants to come in and put 150 units of affordable housing, high-tech housing. I said this in the city council hearing this week. I work all over the country on zoning, and rarely, if ever, do I bring or see an affordable housing project get people jumping for joy. Sadly, some people are in favor of it, but usually the neighbors are not. It just doesn't have good connotations, no matter how nice you make it. I will say in that we had some missteps on the public engagement from my client early on. They would admit that, and that was a mistake. And so there was a lot of catch-up work that had to be done because they genuinely want to engage, they just didn't do a great job to begin with. So there was a lot of engagement that sort of happened towards the back end of the project that we wish would have happened earlier. But how do you deal with it? You have to engage. You have to meet the neighbors and try to compromise. And they're not always going to still like it. I mean, we made a lot of changes. We took off a floor of one of the buildings. We reduced the number of units. We took out a pool that was going to be maybe noisy that the neighbors didn't want, took that out, added parking, put in a whole bunch of buffering landscaping around, and a lot of concessions were made. And that was important because we were listening to the neighbors. Now, this project got approved by the City Planning Commission, recommended approval to the City Council, and because the city's really focused on affordable housing, they approved it because they thought it was a good project for that location over the objection of many of the neighbors. Tough situation. No, I get both sides of it. It's hard, and it's changed. Right now you have a vacant lot, 4 acres, and that's what people are used to. Now you're talking about 150 units of housing, and dare I say, affordable housing is not always. People have misperceptions and misconceptions about the who. Sometimes more than the what. So how do we deal with that? A lot of engagement, a lot of discussions and education. And luckily we're going to have 150 new housing units, but we need tens of thousands of housing units. So we're just chipping away slowly but surely.
And as I think on projects that get delayed or wind up in appeals and court cases and have longer, more difficult outcomes than it's expected. I think I've seen a spectrum of projects from a residential fence that's too tall and too opaque to an urban agriculture use on a vacant residential land to a new townhouse development. None of us can predict the future. I think to the developer and to city staff, these were all projects that seem sort of easy breezy. Yes, you need a hearing, but it's very simple, supportable relief. And the one thing they all have in common that turned them into a longer, more difficult process is if that property owner had talked to their neighbors and talked to the community council before they started the project, they would have heard loud and clear that their neighbors had significant concerns with that project. And they could have waited that time, is this the lift that I want for my project, or would I rather move on to another site? Do I want to rethink my project? Let's work with the neighbors, see how we can meet both of our goals. But I think that engagement element, particularly with the people that are living directly next to your project, very early on, it's really helpful to troubleshoot issues that might arise later.
I have three really quick, and I was trying to think of something good to tell you guys. When I mentioned before about the permitting that we do in buildings and then the courtesy inspection, remember that's a small scale stuff in the CSR. Just before I came here, this actually happened. An inspector came to my office, told me about an address that someone, and a lot of times the inspectors, part of their job, so I'll put this up front, their job, they police different neighborhoods. So that's their responsibility. So this individual was driving through, stopped at a house, someone had started building a home without any permits. The actual framing of the house was not attached to the foundation. So an argument ensued between the inspector and the individual because they were told, you have to get permits. That's an illegal situation, so on and so forth. So I try to tell clients, please, I know sometimes you want to get stuff done quickly, just get the permit. Because it's going to save peace of mind, I don't know about you guys, is important. So you don't want to spend money on something that significant and do it and try to cut corners just because you think you're going to save time. You're actually going to cost yourself more. And then courtesy inspection. A lot of clients, guy called me the day before yesterday. I worked with him in the past. He called frustrated because, I'm not sure why, but he keeps trying to find a daycare center. But instead of going, and I've told him this in email, instead of going to zoning first, to find out if the use is allowed before coming to me, you're missing an opportunity to get yourself on the right track. So he's been going around, looking at different locations, only to find out that it's not right. And I asked him a question, did you ever call zoning? Why do I need to call zoning? Because everything starts there. You can't get the use, you can't get the permit, you can't get your certificate to even open the door to go in and use it without the use being allowed. That's where everything starts. And then the coordinated site, just had a guy that's going to build 2 single-family homes. I think the 2 are going to be like 1.5 million, somewhere around there, 2. But again, he's in the process. I don't know all of his team. He's not a new developer. He's been through this before, but that rush scenario that I just mentioned before, rushed it in. And because he's on this construction season timing, trying to get everything done in time, he didn't submit various different documentation that we need so that all the departments can see it from their lens. So now he's upset because he's upset with us, but he didn't do his part. So take your time, get your permits, call the necessary people. We're not the boogeyman. We just want to help you if you allow us to help.
It sounds like there's like a shift, right? We think about zoning and permitting as this hurdle that we've got to go over, but if we are proactive, have these conversations up front, it's actually part of your strategy, right? It'll really help your project and help your peace of mind. So with that, do we have any questions from folks? Okay, if you could just say your name and I'll get you a microphone.
Roosevelt Nixon. I think everybody should be able to hear me.
Yeah, yep.
But my question is your courtesy inspection and your coordinated site inspection. Are they both the same price, or would the coordinated site inspection be in the permit?
Yeah, the coordinated site is free. We do that to kind of help the project get moving, so that then when you come in for the permit, you'll pay your fees for your permit at that point.
Okay. And then my second question is for Sean. What does a consulting fee cost if I had to add that to my budget?
That's a great question. So I would say, it's hard to answer, but I would say, you're not talking about a ton of money. It's usually, to go through a zone change process, depends on how contentious, it could be, $10,000, $5,000 to get through some of this stuff. So it's not, I think it's somewhat, the folks that try to speed it up oftentimes also try to cut costs on this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, if you're doing a multi-million-dollar project, hiring someone to help you through the permitting process and through the zoning process for 5, 10, 15,000, probably on the high end, is worth it, is a percentage of the project. And whether that's your architect, a lawyer, whoever, it can be money well spent. So, and it can be lower than that, just depends on what it is. Just making some phone calls and helping you through is not going to cost much at all.
And we've got time for one more question.
Mayor McConnell, and so I've been doing zoning with you guys for years, and consulting, and is the software that you're going to be using for markups going to be Bluebeam, or is it some other, do you know? That's kind of like our industry, that seems to be what we're all using, consulting is using like across the board in AE, and MEP does too, but,
I'm not sure
okay.
what it's actually called.
Bluebeam, oh yeah, so Bluebeam is what we're using. It helps, right, if we're all on the same thing, because we put in the cloud. And then the second thing is, my early years, I'm not dating myself, but my early years, going to the zoning meetings and watching the people in front of me, right, like the pitfalls, and then I had my turn, like, going through it too, was where I kind of learned how not to present, like how not to talk to the council, or, you know, what to do. And that was my kind of my growing pain in that just decades ago. So, and I don't know, it seems like they have breakout rooms now more, and it's a little more isolated. But is that stuff published online where developers or people that are new to it can go in and watch some of these zoning meetings, so they can kind of, you know, see somebody else go through it? It's so helpful.
And there is, the City Planning Commission is on city cable. Their meetings are the administrative hearings, the zoning hearing examiner, the historic conservation board. If you go through the buildings and inspections website, there's a hearings tab. On that tab, there's a YouTube channel. And so previous hearings are archived there, and live hearings you can watch during the hearing there.
All right, well, thank you both for your questions. I just want to say a final thank you to the three of you. I can't say enough about how these are the people to know, and they're going to be here. So if you guys have any questions, I know we've got a great keynote speaker coming up, but I think folks will be sticking around, and we've got our contact information, and you should get these slides after today's conference. So thank you, and thank the three of you so much.